Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to June on the Range, an inaugural BookTube event for 2022 that was created by Michael K. Vaughan. I'm one of the posse of co-hosts, and the event is designed, as the title implies, to celebrate westerns, Western fiction, which for a long time was championed at the box office, on the TV, on the radio, and in the bookstores, and is now all but gone. There are this tiny handful of authors who cling to writing traditional Western novels, but they virtually never appear anymore. Nothing like that is done straight up and non-ironically would ever even remotely approach the New York Times bestseller list. So it's largely a question of looking at older novels, although not exclusively that, because permutations, variations on the Western have persisted, specifically in the romance field. And I wanted to give you an update on some of the June on the Range reading that I've been doing. I've been doing a huge amount of reading Westerns this June, an enormous amount. Far, far more than I'm talking about on this channel. I started out with Louis L'Amour. I read a lot of Louis L'Amour, and then I moved on to other authors, including several prolific Western authors, and have just kept that up. We're in the final week of June on the Range now. I'm just going to keep that up. These things are fantastic refuges from the hurly-burly of the world, and in the last 2 weeks, the hurly-burly of the world has camped in my kitchen, tearing it apart, ripping out floorboards, ripping out cupboards, ripping out wall material and whatnot, and is now moving on to the rest of Hyde Cottage. So next week is going to be even worse than last week was in terms of noise and intrusion and dust and also worse in terms of the need for relief, for reading relief. I've been doing a huge amount of reading, a lot of Westerns, but a lot of everything, a lot more than I would ordinarily have done in June. I've been doing a huge amount more writing too. It's just when you're on all the time and you don't get to relax, I just end up being more productive. But I wanted to give you a little thumbnail of some of the things that I've been reading for June on the Range. I'm just going to keep up. I had some themes for the first few weeks of June on the Range, but I think for the last week I'm just going to read whatever comes to hand, whatever that falls under the broad umbrella of June on the Range. I'm just going to read for the rest of the month. So the first one that I want to show you is a reread. This is by Joe Goodman, and it is called This Gun for Hire. I actually have the print copy of this somewhere over there, or in this room, on the romance bookshelf. But this is the cover, fantastic cover. This is the story of a young ex-cavalryman who decides to take a protection job for a wealthy man. But the more he sees what things are like, the more he sees the lay of the land, the more he realizes that he needs help. And he gets help from an intrepid woman who sort of goes undercover in the household of the wealthy man to be in a better position to thwart any kind of violence against him and his family. And as you would predict from a romance, love blossoms between the two of them. Very grudgingly on both parts. Neither one of them is really up for that idea. But I think it's fantastic. Joe Goodman's books are a little deceptive. They are packaged in a normal mass market paperback, but the type font is smaller. She writes detailed, dense, really intelligent Westerns, Western romances. I've never read a book, but I've read probably 7 or 8 books by her. I've never read one that didn't immensely please me. And that is said, of course, by the yardstick of romantic Westerns, right? You can't use the yardstick of Gothic horror or the English ghost story when you're talking about romantic Westerns. You have to use its own yardstick, and plenty of them are terrible. Joe Goodman's books are not at all. Then the next one that I want to show you is a bit of an oddity. I didn't quite know what to do with it. I wanted to research it before I read it. But that's always a bad idea. When it comes to fiction, that's always a bad idea. Fiction should sing for its supper. So if I'd researched it, who knows what kind of extra points I would have been taking off or giving. So instead, I just read it straight out, and then I read about it. And it's The Bloody Spur. It's a Caleb York story. This is the main character is a legendary guy named Caleb York. And this is by uh, Mickey Spillane and Max Allan Collins. I don't know what's going on that cover there. I don't know if you can quite make it out. But just about everything about that cover is wrong. Just about everything is. It's not a two-person card game. The currency is wrong. The man is left-handed. He's not firing correctly. If he were firing at someone who was at the table, they would be visible in the shot. Just everything about the picture is just bad Photoshop. But there are other problems with this cover too, and those are the things that had me wanting to research this ahead of time, and that's the whole Mickey Spillane thing. And I had no doubt when I was reading the book, I was thinking, yeah, this does read like Max Allan Collins. This does read like a kind of a, 1,000-book hack. Someone who won't let me down in terms of storytelling, but who's not going to blow my socks off either. But what's this Mickey Spillane business? And then I went and read about this, and it's the standard battered tin dispatch box nonsense about how Mickey Spillane thought up this character of Caleb York and then had a whole bunch of stories either written or heavily outlined that Max Allan Collins, or lots and lots of notes that Max Allan Collins could swoop in after Mickey Spillane's death and just keep writing these things. And I think there's a whole bunch of these Caleb York novels that have Mickey Spillane's name splattered across the top of them, big as life, when he had nothing to do with these books at all. I don't believe that wheeze when Max Allan Collins tells me to believe it any more than I believe it when everybody else does. but this was still enjoyable in a kind of a hokey way. It was kind of a hokey way. It reminded me of Earl Stanley Gardner or Gardner Fox or any of those 1,000-book hacks, the people that just have a... They just have a, like for instance, if you've ever seen a video where someone does one of those consecutive motion dioramas, so the video will show them dropping a little ball into a chute, and it will go down the chute, and it will hit a hammer, and the hammer will hit a lever, and the lever will hit a ball, and the ball will hit some dominoes, and the dominoes will fall over to knock another ball down another chute, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on like that. And this kind of writing, I'm not just picking on Max Allan Collins here. There are a bunch of writers who are like this. And it's not a bad thing. You would never, when you're watching one of those videos, you would never stop watching until the ball gets to the end. You would never do that. It consistently maintains your attention. But aside from failing, that kind of a consecutive motion sort of drop action thing can't ever do any but one thing, right? It's been carefully designed so that it can only do one thing. And your question at every juncture that it goes through is going to be what happens next. And that's all. You could drop that, if you set up the course identically, you could drop that ball in 1,000 times and it would work every time exactly the same way. So there's no chance of any of these novels lifting you out of yourself. There's no chance that they will lift out of themselves. They are purely mechanical constructs, is what I'm saying. Thrilling, if they're done well, if they don't fail. This one didn't fail. But only that, not anything else. But I have a couple of other... I wonder what those things are called. I should know that. What are those things called? I know they're not called, like, stop action. I don't know what their actual name is, but you know what I mean. And there was recently, I think on Twitter, an epic, just unbelievable. You didn't believe you were watching it. It must have taken the better part of a year to construct and test in order to get it filmed just that one time. I wish I could if I could find it, I'll leave a link to it. But that's what I think of when I think of these 1,000 novel hacks. These people who, well, I don't know any of these authors, but I have known some of their counterparts in the past, and I can safely say their heart's not in it. Their heart doesn't need to be in it anymore. They're going to generate a book, and it's going to have 2 eyes and 2 nostrils and 2 ears, and it's going to do what it's supposed to do, and it's not going to lift it's going to set the hairs on end at all. It'll just please you. It's just meant to please you, which is no small thing. And I can say a little bit more than that about this next author. This next author is Ralph Compton. And I read 2 of his, I think these are called Sundown Rider books. The Skeleton Load is one. And then the other one I read was Demon's Pass. Oh, yeah, it says it right there, Sundown Riders, which is a giant grizzly bear on the cover. But again, the cover is poorly done because the man is at the wrong angle to the grizzly bear. And unless he's planning to dance, I don't know why he's not leveling his gun. But even so, you can see, right, the man, you should be turning him just 30 degrees, 20 degrees in this direction. It's just poorly done. It's poor Photoshop or whatever the cover making software is. That is just wrong. The bear also would probably not do that. That's what a trained bear would do. But it's not what an actual grizzly bear would do. And the man would be certainly pointing his gun at the bear. But this is... this novel starts off with an Indian attack, an Indian massacre. They massacred a wagon train, and there's only one young survivor, a little boy, who knows that he has his whole life savings and money. He knows where it was hidden. It was hidden right before the attack. And when he is staggering, he's surprised by sheer luck, and when he's staggering through the wreckage, looking at these stripped and burnt and naked bodies, a lone horseman rides up who is willing to help him. And realizes pretty quickly, the boy is trying to be surreptitious about it, but the man realizes pretty quickly that the boy has a substantial amount of money that he's hiding. And eventually they decide, the man confronts him with that, and they decide to trust each other. And the adventure goes from there, where unfortunately you're spending too much time thinking about that nest egg of money, which kind of detracts from the drama until the halfway point when it no longer matters. But Demon's Pass and Skeleton Load, they were better than Max Allan Collins pretending that he's writing with Mickey Spillane, but they weren't much better. They were reminders to me. We talk on June on the Range, we talk about how just an endless sea of Westerns that are out there. Just an endless sea. It would take you 2 years to read the output of just a single author, of some of the authors that did this stuff, because it was so prolific. And it was everywhere. It would take a lifetime to scratch the surface of how many Western novels are out there. And we talk about, I mentioned on this channel myself, that inevitably leads to just eyeball levels of mediocrity. That's unavoidable. It's not like you're going to find a gem every single time. And Ralph Compton, I've read now 4 of his books. None of them did anything for me. They were amiable enough. There were some good natural descriptions, but they weren't much better than Max Allan Collins or a couple of other people that I've read for June on the Range. But that's not the whole of it. There was one standout author that I read where I was just smiling from ear to ear, not at the ending. The ending will very much make you smile, especially the last paragraph. But even in the middle, when things are darkest for our hero, I was still smiling because of how well done this is. It reminded me of Joe Goodman, where no line, no piece of dialogue, no simple scene, even if it's just mechanical, getting characters from point A to point B, is taken for granted by the author, where nothing is taken for granted by the author, and all of it is infused with the author's intelligence. And that was this, an author I've never read before, Ed Gorman. This is his novel, Relentless. And it's the story of a small-town sheriff who's really a really good man, an upright man, seemingly one of the only strong, upright men in the town that is completely dominated by its richest person. So we come full circle, right? Because the person dominating the narrative in This Gun for Hire by Joe Goodman is also the richest person in the book. And the same thing is true here. There's an unscrupulous, sort of brutal, wealthy guy who dominates this town. It's a tense, polar relationship between the sheriff and this plutocrat. But the sheriff makes it known to everyone that he's impartial when it comes to the law. He's not playing favorites. He's not in anyone's pay. And when that rich man's son becomes entangled in the law, the sheriff has no qualms about going after him. This is, again, a bad cover. I don't know what to say about it. It's just a bad cover. The star is all wrong. That star is the size of this person's stomach. And it had to be that big because you're thinking, well, if it isn't that big, then you, the viewer of the cover, won't be able to read it. But the way to fix that is to do good foregrounding. good depth perception there, instead of just putting it on the ground at level with a foot when it's huge, when it's gigantic. And also, in order to have the gun in the frame and work with the cover, the person on the cover, once again, has to hold the gun wrong. Anyway, the book is what we're talking about. And in retaliation for, this no fear or favor approach to the son of the richest man in town, the sheriff's wife's sordid personal background is brought to light. So there's a blackmail idea going on, and then a character who enters into the story is found dead, and every piece of evidence looks like it points to the sheriff's wife. Their relationship is wonderfully done, totally intelligent, thoroughly adult. They very much enjoy each other in every sense of the word. They even like to bathe before they enjoy each other, which is a comparative rarity in a Western novel. And there is such fantastic dialogue in this book that I wanted every scene. I mean, there's action. There's plenty of action. There's a great scene in which the sheriff and a minor character, a secondary character who turns out to be a bit of a Iago, there's a scene where that I would say is the most violent scene in the book, where no violence happens. Violence is only implied the whole time, but it's implied so heavily and so effectively by Ed Gorman that I felt like I just watched a shootout or a fist fight of some kind or other. And there is action in the book, but the main draw for me was the personalities. I wanted every scene where the characters are talking to each other to go on forever. And I finished it thinking, what a terrific little book. Just, it's not Dostoevsky, but what a terrific little Western. Exactly what I wanted for June on the Range. And in addition to a purely enjoyable reading experience, I also have a new author. I've never read this author before, and what are the chances that this will be a one-off thing? I don't think it is. It's a genre book, so I bet it's not a one-off thing. I bet that if I read more of this author, I'll find more good stuff. So that's just a little progress report that I have for you for June on the Range. It's not much. This is a time of great dislocation for me. Lots and lots of construction going on here, lots and lots of disturbance, and that's only going to get worse next week. The main thing that I want to avoid next week is to give in to the irritation that I will no doubt be feeling and simply not make any videos. Better to make videos that have a little bit of background noise or a little bit hard to hear or a little bit inconvenient for me than not to make any at all until this construction ends, if it ever does. So I'm going to try to stick to that rather than yield to petulance. So I will definitely have more June on the Range updates for you in due time. In the meantime, I'm going to wrap this up and hope that it's audible. And I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.